All right, so you're here with us because you want to cut through the noise, right? You want to
Yeah.
get to the heart of what really matters quickly and thoroughly. Today, we're going to be tackling a challenge that a lot of you guys face,
Mm-hmm.
speaking English more fluently and with real confidence without overthinking everything.
Yeah. You know that feeling when you really want to say something, but it's like there's something holding you back?
Yeah, totally.
So that's exactly what we're diving into today,
Mhm.
specifically in the context of, learning and using English.
And to help guide us through this, we have a really cool YouTube video that we found from the Easy English Talk channel.
God, good channel.
And it's called Stop Thinking, Start Talking, Learn English with Podcast Conversation English Podcast. It's basically a conversation that's aimed directly at helping English learners.
Exactly. They're trying to help learners like you overcome this hurdle.
Exactly. So our mission today is pretty straightforward. It's to kind of extract the most effective strategies and really important mindset shifts from that video so that we can give you guys some really actionable insights.
Exactly.
So you can stop hesitating and start expressing yourself in English more naturally and confidently. So one of the things that the video hits on right away is this problem of overthinking, right?
Yeah.
So what are some of those core fears and worries that tend to trap English learners in this cycle?
It's really interesting how universal these anxieties are. The video really pinpoints the big ones. The fear of making mistakes, the
Yeah.
fear of being misunderstood, or even sounding a bit foolish, right?
For sure.
It's like that little internal critic that we have. That often becomes our biggest obstacle.
Totally. It's like
Yeah.
we have this perfect ideal of what an English speaker should sound like in our head, and then we're just so terrified to fall short of that.
Right, exactly.
And the video makes a really good comparison here with native speakers.
Yeah. Native speakers, think about it. They stumble all the time. They make grammatical slips.
Yeah,
We all do. Sentences aren't perfectly formed, but they keep going.
right.
They don't let it stop them. And that's the crucial difference. As the video highlights, they're not getting stuck in that trap of overthinking every single word before it comes out of their mouths.
Right. It's not just fear, though, is it? I think the video also touches on the fact that some of the methods that a lot of learners use can actually be contributing to this hesitation, this whole idea of translating from your native tongue.
Yeah, if you're consistently translating word for word in your head
Mhm.
before speaking English, then it's naturally going to slow down your response time.
Right.
Right? By the time you've mentally constructed this perfect sentence in your head, the conversation might have already moved on,
Totally.
and that leads to frustration.
Yeah.
And then you're just less likely to participate.
And then the lack of confidence just becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy almost, doesn't it? I'm worried about my accent. I don't think my vocabulary is broad enough.
Yeah.
And then that just keeps feeding back into itself.
Yeah, absolutely. The video explains how these concerns can lead to silence, and unfortunately, that silence just makes the problem even worse.
Right.
Right? The less you speak, the more apprehensive you become about speaking. So it's a cycle of overthinking and avoidance that kind of feeds on itself.
Yeah, for sure. I think a really encouraging takeaway, though, from the video, right from the beginning, is you don't need to be perfect to be fluent.
Exactly.
no.
The video emphasizes that consistent effort and a willingness to just communicate, especially at the beginning,
Mm.
are way more valuable than striving for some kind of flawless, perfect English.
So we've clearly kind of laid out, what the roadblock is, what overthinking does to a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
So let's focus on the solution a little bit. And the
Yeah.
video, gives a really good kind of explanation of this. Speak first and worry about the details later. So why is this approach so important?
Well, if you think about it, it makes sense, right? Fluency is all about the speed and naturalness with which you can form sentences and express yourself.
Right.
If you're always pausing to think about grammar rules or choosing the perfect word, you're basically interrupting that automatic process from developing. And practice is really the engine of fluency. The more you use the language, the smoother it becomes. And one of the best analogies that the video gives is comparing it to how babies learn to talk.
Right.
They don't start memorizing grammar rules, do they?
No, absolutely not.
They just listen, they repeat sounds, and they keep trying, even though they're making tons and tons of mistakes.
Right.
But eventually, their speech just develops naturally.
Yeah.
So the video is saying that we can take a page from that book
Yeah.
and try to adopt a similar approach. Less analytical, more just trying to communicate.
Yeah. It's almost counterintuitive, isn't it? Because you would think that you'd want to build this solid grammatical foundation and then start constructing sentences. But it
Yeah.
sounds like with languages, you kind of have to start building, even if the structure is shaky at first.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. And the video really underscores that in everyday conversation, native speakers aren't prioritizing grammar above all else. They're prioritizing getting their message across
Right.
and being understood. And, they're not usually highly critical of minor errors.
No.
And in fact, if you are more relaxed and natural, you actually sound more confident.
Totally.
And that confidence can be much more impactful than perfect grammar when it comes to how other people perceive you.
Yeah. And let's be honest, native speakers make mistakes all the time, too.
Yeah, all the time.
We all do. So, I mean, if a native English speaker can mess up their tenses or use the wrong preposition and still be understood,
Right.
why should English learners be held to this, like, impossibly high standard of perfect speech from the very beginning?
Exactly.
The key is to just keep practicing.
Keep practicing and keep speaking. Let your brain figure it out.
Yeah. So thinking less, talking more. That's
Yeah.
the principle, right?
Exactly.
So let's get down to some tactics. What are some of the actionable tips that the video gives us?
So there's a bunch of really helpful strategies. And one of the first and most important ones is to try to think in English.
Okay. So how do you even begin to make that switch?
Well, the video suggests a really simple exercise, which is basically narrating your daily activities to yourself in English.
Okay.
So, for example, imagine you're making coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
You just say to yourself, okay, I'm getting the coffee beans. The kettle is boiling water. I'm pouring the hot water.
Right.
You're just making English a constant presence in your inner monologue.
Yeah. Yeah. Just creating those neural pathways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's another one?
So another key piece of advice is don't worry too much about grammar, at least not at the beginning of a conversation.
Okay, so I know a lot of learners, especially, they've been taught in a more traditional way.
Right.
Might find that a little unsettling.
Oh, definitely. But, the video acknowledges that grammar has its place.
Right. But during a conversation, the most important thing is to communicate,
Yeah.
to get your message across. So even if you have some grammatical errors, you'll probably still be understood.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's more important to keep the flow of the conversation going.
Yeah.
And again, the video is saying that the more you practice, eventually your brain will just start to internalize those grammatical structures.
Yeah. So focus on getting the thoughts out, even if the sentence structure isn't perfect.
Exactly.
What else?
So this one is another really big one. The video strongly advocates for practicing speaking by yourself.
Okay, so talking to yourself.
Yeah, pretty much.
That might feel a little strange for some people.
Yeah, the video actually talks about that.
Okay.
It recommends that you just stand in front of a mirror, have a conversation with yourself in the mirror, describe what you see around you.
Okay.
It's a way to get comfortable with the physical act of speaking without any pressure or judgment.
So you're just getting used to, like, forming the sounds and getting comfortable with the words and stuff.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. What comes next?
So another technique that's really interesting that the video highlights is called shadowing.
Okay. Tell me more about shadowing. What is that?
So imagine you're listening to a native English speaker. It could be from a YouTube video, a podcast, even a scene from a movie.
Right.
And as you're listening, you're immediately repeating what they say, trying to copy their pronunciation, their rhythm, their intonation, everything.
Oh, wow.
And you're trying to do it as closely as possible.
Right.
So it's like you're a vocal echo.
Wow. Okay.
And this is a really good way to develop a more natural flow to your spoken English.
Okay.
And you don't need a teacher for this. You could do this with any audio or video material.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm.
So it's a really powerful way to practice.
So it's almost like you're training your mouth to move in that way.
Exactly.
And the sound to come out in a more natural way, like a native speaker.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. What about, like, when we're in a conversation, like, with another person?
Right.
Any advice for that?
Well, one thing that the video advises is to keep your sentences simple.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of times, as you learn more and more, you might be tempted to create longer, more complex sentences.
Yeah.
Which is great. You want to challenge yourself. But what often happens is that's when the hesitation comes in.
Right.
When you're trying to construct this perfect sentence in your head. So it's perfectly fine to start with shorter, more straightforward sentences, just to keep that flow of the conversation going. Clarity and momentum are better than complexity in this situation.
Yeah. You're keeping that conversational ball rolling.
Exactly.
Now, what about those times when we make mistakes?
Yeah.
Because it's going to happen, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh.
And that's where the video really encourages us to embrace those mistakes.
Yeah.
Like really wholeheartedly embrace those mistakes.
And I know that's easier said than done for a lot of learners.
Totally.
But why? Why is it so important to embrace those mistakes?
Well, the video makes the point that if you're too afraid of making mistakes, you're just not going to speak at all.
Right. And that's really the biggest mistake you can make.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're not getting that practice.
Yeah, you're not getting that experience.
And the video says, look, mistakes are proof that you're pushing yourself, that you're trying to use the language.
Right.
And they're totally natural and necessary.
So instead of kind of dwelling on those mistakes, we should be looking at them as like stepping stones.
Exactly.
And that we're getting better over time.
Exactly.
Okay. So what else can we do to actively make ourselves more comfortable with the language?
So another thing that the video really emphasizes is immersion.
Okay. So surrounding yourself with English, even if you're not living in an English-speaking country.
Exactly. So, listen to English podcasts, watch movies and TV shows, read English books and articles.
Right.
Really try to surround yourself as much as possible.
So even that passive listening can really have an impact.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay. And what's the final tip that the video gives us? So the last one is, it suggests setting a speaking challenge for yourself.
Okay. So what kind of challenge?
So it could be something really simple, like, 5 minutes a day.
Mm-hmm.
And for those 5 minutes, you just speak English continuously.
Okay.
And even if you get stuck, if you don't know the exact word, you try to find a different way to express the idea.
Right.
Paraphrase. Describe it using simpler terms.
Right.
Just to keep that flow going.
Yeah.
It's a really good confidence builder.
Yeah, for sure. So, we've talked about the practical tips and changing our habits and how we approach practicing.
Right.
But the video also talks about mindset.
Yeah. Mindset's huge.
Yeah. So how can we develop a more confident mental approach to speaking English?
So there are a few key mindset shifts that the video highlights. And the first one is understand that confidence actually comes from action.
Okay.
So a lot of people think, oh, I'll speak more when I feel more confident.
Right, yeah. I have to wait until I feel confident and then I'll speak.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the video's saying that it actually works the other way around.
Okay.
Confidence comes from doing the thing, from speaking,
Right.
even if it's imperfect. So just start speaking, and then the confidence will grow from that.
Yeah. So don't wait for that perfect moment. Just jump in.
Exactly.
Oh, no.
So another big one is shifting our focus away from perfection to just communicating effectively.
Okay. Yeah, we touched on that with the grammar a little bit, but I think this is broader than that.
It is. It's really about the overall expectations that you have for yourself.
Right.
Right? The goal of speaking is to share your thoughts and ideas.
Yeah.
And connect with other people. And while perfect grammar and pronunciation are great long-term goals, they're not essential for communication.
Right.
And even native speakers don't speak perfectly all the time.
Of course not.
So don't hold yourself to that standard because it's just going to discourage you.
It takes the pressure off a little bit, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It makes it feel less like a presentation and more like a natural exchange. Exactly. What else do we need to keep in mind in terms of mindset?
So another really important one is to reframe mistakes as learning opportunities.
Okay. So instead of seeing them as something to be ashamed of or discouraged by.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, see them as feedback. They're showing you what you need to work on.
Right.
And if you're never making mistakes, it might mean you're not challenging yourself enough.
Okay. That's a really healthy way to look at it.
Yeah.
What about comparing yourself to other English speakers?
Yeah.
Because I think that's a big one too.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And, the video's advice here is really valuable. Stop comparing your progress to others.
Yeah.
Compare yourself to where you were in the past.
Right. Because everybody is on a different journey.
Exactly.
Different backgrounds, different opportunities to practice, different amounts of time that they've been studying.
Right.
Can be really discouraging to compare yourself to somebody else. So are you able to express yourself better today than you could a month ago? If the answer is yes, then you're making progress.
You're on the right track.
Exactly. So it's about celebrating your own journey
Exactly.
and not getting caught up in that comparison game.
Absolutely.
And lastly, I think, in terms of mindset, the video mentions being okay with being uncomfortable.
Yes. Embracing that feeling of discomfort.
Because I think, it can be awkward, it can be nerve-wracking,
Totally.
to speak a language that's not your native language.
Right. And the video acknowledges this.
Mm.
But what they're saying is that feeling of discomfort is actually totally normal and necessary.
Okay.
In fact, it's kind of a sign that you're growing.
Right.
right? Because you're pushing yourself outside of that comfort zone.
Yeah, you're challenging yourself.
Exactly. So, the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So it's about changing that internal dialogue, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
kind of adjusting our expectations so that we have a more supportive, encouraging environment within ourselves for language learning. So to sum it all up, the central message from this video is really clear. If you want to be more fluent, you have to stop overthinking and just start talking.
Yeah,
Simple as that. And that means using these tips, accepting mistakes, and prioritizing communication over perfection.
exactly.
So think in English. Don't worry too much about grammar in the middle of a conversation. Practice by yourself. Use the shadowing technique. Keep sentences simple. Embrace mistakes. Immerse yourself in the language. And set those little speaking challenges for yourself.
Yeah. And don't forget about the mindset shifts.
Yeah, of course. Super important.
Build confidence through action. Prioritize communication. See those mistakes as learning experiences. Compare yourself to your past self and embrace that discomfort.
So guys, listening out there, you're now armed with all of this awesome information.
Yeah. Go out and use it.
What's the most important thing now? Put this into practice. Start actually doing it.
Exactly.
And most importantly, believe in yourself. You can absolutely do this.
You have the ability to be fluent. You just have to put in the work, and you have to change your approach.
And on that note, I think that wraps up our deep dive for today.
So go out there and start talking.
We'll see you next time.